A girl accidentally discovered strange noises coming from behind the bathroom mirror. It was the first day her family had arrived on this small island. Recalling the landlord's sinister gaze earlier that day, it was clear that this place was definitely not as simple as it seemed. Sure enough, the next day her underwear was missing. She quickly asked her younger brother who had come along on the trip, but he adamantly denied taking it. If it wasn't her brother, then there was only one other possibility. Just then, strange noises came from behind the mirror again. Stepping forward cautiously, she exhaled onto the mirror and drew a heart on the fogged-up surface to test her suspicion. As expected, it was a one-way mirror. The landlord had not only been spying on her, but was also monitoring every move her family made. And all of this began on a bright and sunny weekend. Richard and his wife were experiencing a career slump. To take a break and fulfill his wife's wish of visiting the place where her grandfather had died in battle, the decision was made to take the whole family on a pleasant vacation. The destination was an island in Sweden called Sarti. What made this island unique was that 200 years ago, in an attempt to stop the spread of a plague, the entire island went into a 2-year self-imposed quarantine. Even after the disease had ended outside the island, they remained completely isolated until starvation drove them to kill one another, eventually resorting to cannibalism. Since then, to commemorate their deceased relatives, the islanders have held the Quarantine Festival every 10 years, a bloody performance that lasts for 8 hours. Fortunately, the new festival was set to begin in just 2 days. The family was eager to witness this legendary and mysterious event. On the way to the dock, they stopped at a restaurant for a short break. Strangely, the owner, upon learning they were British, seemed rather unfriendly. His face was cold and unwelcoming. When he heard that they were headed to Sarkta, his reaction became even more intense. "You cannot go there." So, third, it is forbidden. But Richard didn't take it seriously. They had already booked a stay at a guest house on the island, eager to experience the Quarantine Festival firsthand. The owner warned them kindly, saying the islanders of Sarta had never liked tourists. But the strange occurrences did not stop there. As they were leaving, Sam and Jesse found a decapitated duck in the backyard. From the fresh bloodstains, it was clear that it had been killed not long ago. Shortly after, the family boarded the last ferry before the festival. The small boat was packed with islanders returning with their purchases. Without exception, they all stared intensely at the newcomers, their eerie gazes sending chills down their spines. Just then, a Danish man named Johan emerged, completely drunk. Even the islanders seemed somewhat wary of him. Seizing the chance, the family quickly made an excuse to leave the cabin. In the distance, the island came into view. But the moment they stepped ashore, they were met with the same unsettling stares as on the boat. As the head of the family, Richard mustered the courage to explain their purpose for coming. However, the elderly woman leading the islanders coldly replied, "Quarantine is not a performance. It is our blood-soaked history." She urged them to leave the island immediately. Susan then mentioned that her grandfather had been killed by their ancestors. As expected, this remark completely enraged the female leader. "You will leave this place one way or another." At that moment, their landlord suddenly appeared. After some negotiation, the situation was finally resolved. Mats led the family to his late mother's house, where he casually mentioned that she had been beheaded right there on the couch. Terrified, Richard immediately stood up. That night, Richard was awakened by the sound of drums. Pulling his wife outside, the sight before them was shocking. The islanders, dressed in black robes and wearing masks, held torches and gathered in front of their house. Susan, her voice trembling, begged them to leave, reminding them that their children were still sleeping. At that moment, someone from the crowd stepped forward and threw a dead badger at their feet. It seemed to be a warning. The next morning, Richard confirmed his suspicions with Mats and threatened to leave a bad review of his guest house if he didn't handle the situation quickly. Meanwhile, the restaurant owner had mysteriously died, and the detective investigating the case identified Johan as the prime suspect. However, since leaving the island the previous day, no one had seen him. At the same time, the siblings encountered those strangely dressed islanders again and were even threatened. Their laughter sent shivers down their spines, and Jesse took special notice of the words, "British fraudsters," carved onto a coffin. On the eve of the Quarantine Festival, the leader, Clara, gave a speech. 30 years ago, the islanders continued their tradition through ritual sacrifices, always choosing British people as their victims. Susan's grandfather had been one of them. But this practice had been abandoned for many years. Now, with Richard's family arriving on the island, Clara wanted to revive the tradition. However, many islanders opposed the idea, believing such a practice was outdated, let alone the inhumane act of cannibalism. Despite this, Clara remained determined. With the police suddenly involved, the festival was at risk of being disrupted. So Clara devised a plan. Mats had a particular hobby. He lured young men and women to the island, which was a severe violation of their rules. For years, she had turned a blind eye, but now she offered Mats a chance to redeem himself. On the day of the quarantine festival, the family did not head straight to the performance site, but planned to go swimming at the beach first. This gave Mats the perfect opportunity to drug them. Meanwhile, the performance recreated the historical conflict between the islanders and the British. Back then, the island's leader was a traitor who colluded with the British. Greedy for the island's abundant resources, he falsely claimed that a plague had broken out in the outside world, leading to the closure of the port. This left countless islanders starving and freezing. By the time he realized his mistake, it was too late. Once the islanders learned the truth, they rose in rebellion, giving birth to the tradition of sacrificing the British to honor the spirits of the quarantined dead. However, what Mats failed to realize was that these seemingly kind and harmless outsiders were, in fact, ruthless and deadly. The moment he tried to make his move, the family struck first. What followed was a bloodbath, but the true performance was just beginning. History between the British and the islanders was once again repeating itself. At the critical moment, the detective arrived, and the family of master manipulators immediately switched back into their roles. In the end, they became some of the few survivors on the island, and as the festival came to an end, a new cycle of deception and horror had just begun.